Hello everyone, welcome back to Zoo with Grace. Today we are going to learn about all the three germinal layers, that is the ectoderm, mesoderm and the endoderm, and the developmental stages. We'll start with the developmental stages. Now this is the zygote, where the fusion of two nuclei leads to the formation of the zygote, the single cell stage. Then it is an 8-cell stage, then the blastula. The inside cavity of the blastula, you can see this is the blastocoele, then the gastrula, and the cross section of the gastrula. The process is called gastrulation, where all the germinal layers are formed. And these occurs with the help of the process is called morphogenetic movements. Morphogenetic movements. That is nothing but the movement of cells. There are different types of morphogenetic movements. Now you can see this is the blastula, and this is the blastula, and this is the gastrula. Now the outermost layer is called an ectoderm, and the innermost green color it is called as an endoderm, and the in between it is called as an mesoderm. In between it is called as mesoderm. Okay, we'll study one by one in detail. So we'll start with the ectoderm. What is meant by ectoderm? Ecto means nothing but the outside, and derma means nothing but the skin. Okay, so ectoderm is one of the three primary germ layers found in the early embryonic development. It is the outermost layer and it is superficial to the mesoderm and endoderm. Now it is a superficial layer, the outermost layer. You can see here this is the outermost layer, and it is above to the mesoderm layer, that is nothing but the superficial to the mesodermal layer. Okay. Now how it is originated? It emerges and originates from the outer layer of germ cells. It occurs in the stage called developmental stage called gastrulation. Okay, gastrulation process occurs in the 3rd week of the pregnancy, in which the outer germ cells forms the ectoderm. The outermost germ cells they form the ectoderm in the 3rd week of the pregnancy. Now these ectoderm will be differentiated into the epidermis and the neural tube. Okay. This ectoderm, which is present on the outermost layer, which will be differentiated into this epidermis and the neural tube. Okay, so let's see what are the different derivatives of the ectoderm. So ectoderm, it will form the central nervous system, that is nothing but the brain and the spinal cord. Then the peripheral nervous system. Okay, then the sensory epithelia of the eye, ear, and the nose, and the epithelium and its appendages like hairs and nails, and the mammary glands, the hypophysis, and subcutaneous gland, and the enamel of the teeth. So we can see here. So as it is forming the epidermis and the neural tube, So this process where the neural tube is called as a neurulation. This is called as a neurulation. So while forming this process, entire mechanism of neurulation, there are different types of cells are formed. They are the neural groove cells and neural fold cells and neural crust cells. So every cells will have a unique identity and unique characteristics for performing and forming a different structures. Okay, now we'll see about the ectoderm in detail. You can see here, this is the ectoderm. This is differentiating into the neural crest, the neural tube, and the ectoderm. Okay, so now the outer ectoderm, it is forming the epidermis, hair, nails, the sebaceous glands, the olfactory epithelium, the mouth epithelium, the lens, cornea. Okay, and also forming the anterior pituitary, tooth enamel, and the cheek epithelium. Okay, now coming to the neural cells, they are forming the peripheral nervous system, the adrenal medulla, the melanocytes, and the facial cartilage, and the dentine of the teeth. Okay, and also they form the Schwann cells. What are the Schwann cells? Schwann cells are nothing but they are present on the axon in the neuron structure. Here, it is the neuron structure. This is the axon. On this axon, like this, these are the Schwann cells which act as an insulating mechanism. Okay, Now, they also form the neuroglial cells, okay, and sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, okay. Then we see the neural tube. They are forming the neural tube cells are forming the brain, the neural pituitary, the spinal cord, the motor neurons, and the retina. Retina is nothing but the eye. Here it is forming the retina, and here it is forming the lens cornea, okay. Now, the brain and the spinal cord, this is together called as a central nervous system. So mainly the neural tube is involved in the formation of the central nervous system. Okay. Now we study about the mesoderm, the middle layer of the embryo. Now imagine this is an embryo and this is moving like this, inward direction, okay, invagination, and the cells from this, it will move like this, okay. This is ectoderm, the outermost layer ectoderm, and this is the endoderm, and this is the mesoderm. Let's see what is the actual mesoderm is. The mesoderm is the middle layer of the three germinal layers that develops during the process of gastrulation in the early embryonic development of the embryo in the most animals. Okay. So now, formation of mesoderm, how it is formed. Okay. Now, in the early blastula, the future mesodermal cells which are found on the surface during gastrulation, the cells will rearrange until the mesoderm are on inside of the embryo and the ectoderm on the outside of the embryo. This occurs by invagination of the mesoderm and endodermal cells. They migrate to the interior while the ectodermal spreads cover to the exterior. Okay, so nothing but this is the embryo. Now it is as it is moving inward, like this invagination. As it is moving inward, it is called as an invagination, and the cells which are present on the surface of the ectoderm, okay, on the outer layer of the ectoderm, they have a future, they have a future mesodermal cells, okay, future mesodermal cells. So these future mesodermal cells, what happen? The ectodermal layer, the ectodermal cells, they are moving downward by spreading to the downward movement on both the direction. As it is moving downward, the immediate movement is inward projection. Okay, that is invagination. So while moving invagination, like this invagination, some of the cells, they will be released out. Okay, different morphogenetic movements are involved. With that, they will be moved inward by forming the layer is known as mesoderm. Okay, mesoderm. So the outermost it is an ectoderm, and this is the endoderm, and this in between is a mesoderm. So now let's see what are the derivatives of the mesoderm. The trunk mesoderm of the neurula stage embryo is divided into 4 regions. Okay, so what are the different derivatives from the mesoderm? So mesoderm is divided into the 4 regions. What are they? You can see here. First is the cauda mesoderm. This is the cauda mesoderm. Then paraaxial mesoderm. This is paraaxial mesoderm on both the sides. Okay. Then you can also see intermediate mesoderm. Okay, on both the sides, intermediate mesoderm. And then it is a lateral mesoderm. This is lateral mesoderm. This is lateral mesoderm. Okay. So all these 4 types are divided into all these 4 types. Now let's see one by one. This is the cauda mesoderm, the middle part. Okay, this is the cauda mesoderm, and this process is nothing but the neural tube. Okay, it is formed by process of neurulation. Neural tube formation. Okay, so now cauda mesoderm is nothing but the primitive form of notochord. It is a primitive form of notochord. Okay, it will form a notochord. Okay, now let's see one by one. This is the cauda mesoderm. This forms the notochord. It is the main function to establish the anterior posterior axis. By developing the notochord, it will lead to the development of anterior posterior axis. If it is an embryo, if it is forming like this, the notochord structure, it is dividing the embryo as an axis by giving an axis, that is an anterior part and the posterior. Okay. Now next is the paraxial mesoderm. Both sides on the notochord. It is present on the both sides of the notochord, and the cells of this region will form the somites. Okay, these cells, the paraxial, they'll form the somites. Okay, now the intermediate mesoderm, which are again on the both sides of the paraxial mesoderm. Okay, they will form the urogenital system, both the urinary and the genital system. Okay. Now lateral plate mesoderm, these one. Okay, these structures, these are lateral plate mesoderm. So what it forms? It forms the heart, blood vessels, blood cells, and the lining of the body cavities, the extraembryonic membranes, and the lateral plate mesoderm. And these lateral plate mesoderm will split into two layers. Okay. So now the lateral plate mesoderm, which is the fourth part of the mesoderm, it is divided into the two layers, that is the dorsal layer and the ventral layer. The dorsal layer is a somatic mesoderm. If it undergoes the ectoderm together with the endoderm, it forms an somatopleura. Okay, this is the dorsal layer. The first layer is the dorsal layer. It is somatic mesoderm, and it undergoes the ectoderm. Okay, it undergoes the ectoderm, and together with the ectoderm it forms an somatopleura. And next is the ventral layer. It is a splanknomesodum or splanchnic mesoderm. It overlies the endoderm. Together with the endoderm it forms the splanchnoplura. Okay, the important thing is the outer, that is the dorsal layer of the lateral mesoderm, it forms the somatopleura, and the ventral layer, the inner layer of the lateral plate mesoderm, it is forming the splanchnoplura. Okay. Now, the space between these somatopleura and the splanchnoplura, it is forming a coelom, the cavity, the empty cavity, that is in a coelom. Okay. Now, we'll see what are the different derivatives formed from the mesoderm, that is embryonic mesoderm. Now, the mesoderm is divided into the lateral mesoderm, paraxial mesoderm, and the intermediate mesoderm. Okay, we'll see with the paraxial mesoderm. Okay, first one we studied, that is an precaudal mesoderm. Precaudal mesoderm, right? This precaudal mesoderm, it will form on a notochord. Notochord. Okay. Now we are studying about the paraxial, the second one. This is the first one, and this is the second one, and this is the third one, and this is the fourth one. Okay. Paraxial mesoderm. The paraxial mesoderm, it will form the dermis of the skin, the muscles, that is axial muscles, axial limb muscles, and limb muscles. Okay. Now skeletal. Okay, not the limb, the skeletal, axial skeleton. Okay. Now you come to the intermediate mesoderm. It is forming the urogenital system, that is kidneys, ureter, and ureter, not the bladder. Okay, only the kidney and the ureters. Now adrenal cortex, adrenal medulla is formed by the ectoderm, but adrenal cortex is formed by the mesoderm. Okay. Now gonads, they will form the gonads, but they will not produce the gametes. Okay. Now vagina, uterus, and uterine tubes, all uterine tubes. Okay. Vagina, uterus, and the uterine tubes, all these are formed from the intermediate mesoderm. Now come to lateral mesoderm. These lateral mesoderm is divided into splanchnic mesoderm and somatic mesoderm. This somatic mesoderm is also called dorsal layer. Here we studied in the first line. And the splanchnic mesoderm is the ventral layer. Now, somatic mesoderm, it is forming the skeletal. Here it is forming the limbs. Okay. Here it is forming only axial skeleton. Here it is limb skeleton. Okay. Now, you can also see the pleura, the pericardium, the peritoneum. Okay. Now, it is forming again the splanchnic mesoderm, it is forming myocardium, respiratory tract wall, gut wall, visceral pleura, peritoneum, mesenteries. Okay. Epicardium. You can see here epicardium here. Here it is myocardium, means Epi in the myo is formed by the splanchnic mesoderm, whereas pericardium, it is formed by the, this is pericardium, it is formed by the somatic mesoderm. Okay. Now, we'll go to the next, that is the endoderm. What is endoderm? The endoderm is the one of the three primary germ layers of an embryo, that is the source of the epithelium of digestive tract and its derivatives of the lower respiratory tract, and it is the innermost layer. Okay, ectoderm is the innermost layer. How it is formed? The endoderm formation. Okay, cells migrate inward along the archenteron from the inner layer of the gastrula, with developing into the endoderm. I've told you this is the embryo. Now these are ectodermal cells moving like this inward projection. Okay, like this inward projection. This is nothing but the archenteron. Okay, archenteron, the primitive gut. It is called as a primitive gut, archenteron. So now this is the endoderm. Inward movement of the ectodermal cells is known as an endoderm. Okay. Now we'll see about the functions of the endoderm. The two main functions of the endoderms are induce the formation of several mesodermal organs. Okay, it will induce by forming several mesodermal organs and construct the lining of the digestive and the respiratory tracts. Okay, so whenever we study about the digestive and the respiratory tract, we all study about the endothelial lining, endothelial epithelium. That is nothing but they are originated from the endoderm. Okay, so then what are the derivatives here? You can see derivatives, the gastrointestinal tract, that is the digestive system, the entire alimentary canal except the part of the mouth, pharynx and the terminal part of the rectum, which are lined by the involution of ectoderm. Okay, the lining of the cells all glands which open into the digestive tubes, including those livers and the pancreas. So here it is forming all the lining of the gastrointestinal tract, but it is not lining the mouth, the pharynx and the terminal part of the rectum. Okay, and it is lining the liver and the pancreas also. Okay, in the respiratory tract, it is lining the trachea, bronchi, alveoli. Okay, it is common in all the lungs in animals. Okay. Coming to endocrine glands. Okay, so lining of the follicles of thyroid glands. Okay, thyroid gland is an endocrine gland, and the epithelial component of the thymus. Okay, now it is auditory. Again, it is forming an auditory system, that is the tympanal cavity, the auditory tube. So in the ear we have an ear ossicles. Okay, then middle ear, that is tympanic cavity. Okay, that is formed by the endoderm only. Okay, and the auditory tube. Okay, then the urinary system, the urinary bladder and the part of the urethra. So previously what we studied in the mesoderm, it is forming the kidneys and urinary system, but not urinary bladder. Okay, but not the urinary bladder. Okay, here it is forming the urinary bladder. Okay, parts of the urethra. So all this is about all the three germinal layers: ectoderm, endoderm and the mesoderm. Thank you.